You bring shame to this family. You will not enter these doors.
Please, Father, for the sake of your grandchildren, have mercy.
Amina stood quietly at the giant iron gate, holding the hands of her two daughters. The sun burned high above the village. Beyond the gate, music echoed across the massive family estate. Laughter filled the air. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Men in fine suits and women dressed in colorful African fabrics moved through the courtyard, celebrating another family gathering. For a moment, Amina hesitated. Her heart felt heavy. Just 6 months earlier, she had buried her husband. Since then, everything had fallen apart. The small shop they owned had closed. The bills had piled up. The little money they had saved disappeared. Now she had nowhere else to turn. She looked down at Zara and Mia. Their dresses were clean but old. Their sandals were worn. Still, the girls smiled hopefully. "Mother," little Nia whispered, "Grandfather Kofi will help us, right?" Amina forced a smile. "I pray he will." The three of them stepped inside. Almost immediately, conversations slowed. Eyes turned toward them. The cheerful atmosphere changed. A wealthy aunt looked at Amina's faded dress and frowned. Another relative laughed quietly. "Well," one man said loudly, "look who finally came back." Several guests chuckled. A sudden pause fell over the crowd. If you are enjoying this emotional story, don't forget to like, thumbs up, subscribe, bell, share up, right arrow, and comment what you think will happen next. Amina lowered her eyes but continued walking. She approached Grandfather Kofi, who sat proudly in a large chair at the center of the gathering. "Father," she said softly. "I need help. The girls and I have nowhere else to go." Silence spread through the courtyard. Kofi stared at her without emotion. Before he could answer, one of the relatives spoke. "Help them?" Another woman laughed. "Those girls will only become a burden." "Look at their clothes," someone added. "They look like beggars." The word struck Zara and Mia like stones. Mia grabbed her mother's hand tighter. Tears filled her eyes. Amina felt her face burn with shame. "These are your granddaughters," she pleaded. "They are family." Grandfather Kofi slowly stood. His voice was cold. "Family or not, I will not carry another man's problems." Amina froze. The crowd became completely silent. "You are no longer welcome here," Kofi continued. "Take your daughters and leave my estate." A shocked gasp moved through the guests. Amina's eyes filled with tears. Without another word, she turned around. Holding Zara and Nia close, she walked away from the estate beneath the burning African sun. The laughter behind them slowly returned. But Zara did not look back. She clenched her small fists and quietly whispered, "One day, they will regret this." The small house stood at the edge of a poor neighborhood, where dusty roads turned to mud whenever it rained. Months had passed since Amina and her daughters were thrown out of the family estate. Life had become a daily battle. Every morning before sunrise, Amina left home carrying a worn bag over her shoulder. She cleaned houses during the day, sold vegetables in the market in the afternoon, and washed clothes for neighbors at night. Yet it was never enough. Some days, there was only one meal. Other days, there was none. Still, she never complained in front of her daughters. Inside their tiny home, Zara and Nia sat side by side every evening, studying under the glow of a single candle. The flame flickered as the wind slipped through cracks in the walls. "We must keep learning," Zara often said. Nia nodded. "If we study hard, maybe things will change." One night, dark clouds covered the sky. Thunder rolled across the village. Soon, heavy rain began crashing onto the tin roof. Water leaked through small holes, dripping into bowls placed around the room. The girls sat quietly with their books while Amina counted the few coins she had earned that day. 1, 2, 3. That was all. Her hands began to shake. The coins slipped from her fingers and fell onto the floor. For a long moment, she stared at them. Then something inside her finally broke. Tears filled her eyes. "I am trying," she whispered. The girls looked up. Amina covered her face as sobs escaped her chest. "I work every day. Every hour. But I still cannot give you the life you deserve." "Mother," Zara said softly. "What kind of mother cannot feed her children properly?" The room fell silent except for the sound of rain. Mia rushed to hug her. Zara joined them. Together they held their mother tightly. "We are not ashamed of you," Zara whispered. "You are the strongest person we know," Mia added. That night, after Amina finally fell asleep, the sisters sat near the candle. Outside, the storm continued. Zara looked at her younger sister. "We cannot stay like this forever." Mia nodded. "What do we do?" Zara's eyes filled with determination. "We study harder than anyone. We work harder than anyone. One day we will become successful. And we will take care of Mother." The sisters joined hands and made a silent promise beneath the storm. A promise that neither of them would ever forget. The next morning, an unexpected stranger arrives with an opportunity that could change everything. 1 week after the stormy night, Zara sat outside a small roadside shop, reading an old mathematics book she had borrowed from school. Cars passed. People hurried by. But Zara barely noticed. She was completely focused on the numbers in front of her. An elderly man stopped nearby and watched her quietly. His name was Mr. Adewale. He was a retired businessman known throughout the region for building successful companies before stepping away from the business world. For several minutes, he observed the young girl solving difficult problems with nothing but a pencil stub and worn notebook paper. Finally, he smiled. "Young lady," he said. Zara looked up nervously. "Yes, sir." "Who taught you this?" Zara lowered her eyes. "No one. I learned from books." The answer surprised him. The next day, Mr. Adewale visited their small home. Amina was shocked when she opened the door. The respected businessman sat with the family and listened to their story. When Amina finished, he remained silent for a moment. Then he looked at Zara and Mia. "I see something special in both of you," he said. "I want to help." Tears immediately filled Amina's eyes. From that day forward, everything slowly began to change. Mr. Adewale became their mentor. He provided books, school supplies, and guidance. But he made one thing clear. "I can open doors," he told them. "You must do the walking." The sisters took those words seriously. Every morning before sunrise, they studied. Every evening after school, they studied again. While other children played outside, Zara and Mia worked on lessons and practiced new skills. Amina continued sacrificing everything she had. She often skipped meals so her daughters could eat. She wore old clothes so they could buy school materials. Many nights, she worked until her hands ached. Years passed. Slowly, the family climbed out of poverty. Their tiny home improved. The girls became top students. Opportunities that once seemed impossible started appearing. Meanwhile, far away at the family estate, the wealthy relatives enjoyed their comfortable lives. They never asked about Amina. They never thought about Zara or Nia. To them, the three had become forgotten memories. But while they celebrated their wealth, something extraordinary was quietly taking shape. One afternoon, years later, Zara was helping Mr. Adewale organize business papers when her phone suddenly rang. She glanced at the unfamiliar international number flashing across the screen. Her heart skipped a beat. With trembling hands, she answered. One day, Zara receives a life-changing phone call from overseas. The Kofi family estate no longer looked the way it once had. Years earlier, the compound had been filled with expensive cars, laughing guests, and endless celebrations. Now, the gates remained closed most days. The gardens were no longer perfectly maintained. Even the workers whispered among themselves. Something was wrong. Inside the main house, tension hung heavily in the air. Grandfather Kofi sat at the head of a long dining table, staring at a pile of documents. His hands trembled slightly. For the first time in many years, fear had entered his eyes. One bad investment had become another. Then another. Money that once seemed endless had started disappearing. Businesses failed. Properties lost value. Partners walked away. Yet the family kept spending as if nothing had changed. "We need more time," one relative argued. "Time," another shouted. "We are drowning in debt." The room erupted into chaos. Family members pointed fingers at one another. "You were responsible for that investment." "No, you convinced father to approve it." "You wasted money on luxury cars." "At least I didn't lose millions on land deals." The arguments grew louder. Every meeting ended in blame. Every conversation became a fight. Meanwhile, bills continued piling up. Creditors began calling daily. Some family members secretly sold jewelry. Others borrowed money from friends. The same people who once laughed at Amina and her daughters were now struggling to pay basic expenses. The irony was impossible to ignore. Years ago, they had called two little girls a burden. Now they themselves had become burdens to one another. Late one evening, Grandfather Kofi walked alone through the estate. The silence felt strange. Gone were the crowds. Gone were the celebrations. For the first time, he wondered whether greed had destroyed everything his family had built. But it was already too late. The next morning, family members gathered for an emergency meeting. Faces looked exhausted. Nobody smiled. A company representative stood before them holding several documents. The room became silent. The representative adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Then he delivered news that sent shockwaves through the entire family. A shocking announcement reveals that a powerful company is planning to buy all their remaining assets. The village had never seen anything like it. Early that morning, the sound of powerful engines echoed down the dusty road. Children stopped playing. Market vendors abandoned their stalls. Even elders sitting beneath the old trees turned to look. A convoy of luxury black vehicles was approaching. One after another, the expensive cars rolled into the village, their polished surfaces shining beneath the African sun. Within minutes, crowds gathered along the roadside. People whispered excitedly. "Who are they? Government officials? Foreign investors? No one arrives here with cars like these." The vehicles slowly made their way toward the center of the village, stopping near the old community square. The crowd held its breath. At the same time, news spread quickly through the struggling Kofi estate. The relatives rushed outside. They had heard the rumors. A powerful company had recently purchased many important properties in the region. Nobody knew who owned it. Nobody knew who was behind its growing influence. Now everyone wanted answers. The doors of the first vehicle opened. Several well-dressed assistants stepped out. Then another door opened. A graceful woman emerged. She wore an elegant designer suit and carried herself with quiet confidence. The crowd stared. Moments later, another young woman stepped out from the second vehicle. She was equally poised, equally successful-looking. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then an elderly villager gasped. His eyes widened. "It can't be." The word spread through the crowd. People looked closer. And suddenly they recognized them. Zara. Mia. The same two girls who had once walked through the village wearing worn-out dresses and broken sandals. The same girls who had been rejected by their own family. Shock swept through the crowd. Some villagers covered their mouths. Others simply stood frozen. The relatives were speechless. A few stared as if they had seen ghosts. One woman shook her head repeatedly. "No, That's impossible. But it was true. Standing proudly before them were the daughters they had mocked. Years of hard work, sacrifice, and determination had transformed their lives completely. Behind them, another vehicle door opened. Amina stepped out. Elegant. Confident. Respected. The woman who had once been humiliated now walked with dignity. The silence became unbearable. Every relative remembered that painful day when they had turned their backs on her. Then, before anyone could speak, something happened that nobody expected. Grandfather Kofi suddenly drops to his knees and begs for forgiveness. Silence covered the village square. Only moments earlier, Grandfather Kofi had fallen to his knees, begging for forgiveness. Now every eye was fixed on Zara. The once rejected girl stood calmly before the family that had humiliated her mother. Around her, the relatives looked ashamed. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others could not even meet her gaze. Grandfather Kofi lowered his head. "Please," he said quietly. "We were wrong." Several family members nodded. "We made a terrible mistake. Forgive us." Amina listened without speaking. The pain of many years still lived inside her heart. Zara exchanged a glance with Nia before taking a slow step forward. "We did not return only because of what happened to us," Zara said. Her voice was calm, but firm. "We came back because there is something this family never knew." Confused murmurs spread through the crowd. The relatives looked at one another. "What do you mean?" someone asked. Zara nodded toward one of her assistants. The man stepped forward carrying a large folder. Inside were old documents carefully preserved for years. The crowd watched as Zara opened the file. "These papers belong to my grandfather's late brother," she said. "They reveal what happened after my father's death." Grandfather Kofi frowned. For the first time, uncertainty appeared on his face. Zara removed several documents and held them up. "These records show that my mother was entitled to a large portion of the family inheritance." Gasps erupted through the crowd. Amina's eyes widened. She had never seen the papers before. "What?" she whispered. Mia gently took her mother's hand. The villagers leaned closer. Zara continued. "After my father's death, those assets were transferred away from her without her knowledge." The crowd became completely silent. One relative staggered backward. Another covered her mouth in shock. "That cannot be true," someone muttered. But the evidence was there. Signed papers. Official records. Property documents. Years ago, Amina had not simply been abandoned. She had been cheated. The realization hit the family like a storm. All those years of struggle. All those years of poverty. And all along, she had been denied what was rightfully hers. Tears rolled down Amina's cheeks. Not from sadness. From betrayal. The entire crowd stood frozen. No one knew what to say. Then, from the back of the gathering, an unfamiliar voice suddenly broke the silence. "I know the rest of the story." Heads turned instantly. An elderly figure slowly stepped forward from the crowd. A hidden witness suddenly steps forward claiming the betrayal was even worse than anyone imagined. The village square was so quiet that even the wind seemed afraid to move. Hundreds of eyes followed the elderly witness as he stepped forward through the crowd. His face was lined with age. His hands trembled slightly. Yet there was certainty in his eyes. Zara, Nia, and Amina stood motionless. The entire family watched in tense silence. The witness stopped beside Zara and slowly removed a worn leather folder from a small bag. "I kept these documents for many years," he said. "Because I knew the truth would eventually be needed." A nervous murmur spread through the crowd. Grandfather Kofi stared at the folder. Several relatives exchanged worried glances. "What truth?" someone asked. The witness took a deep breath. The inheritance was stolen from Amina. Everyone already knew that much. But the old man shook his head. "No. That was only the beginning. A wave of unease swept through the gathering. Even Zara felt her heartbeat quicken. The witness carefully opened the folder. Inside were old letters, legal papers, and handwritten notes. Documents hidden for decades. The theft was planned, he continued. It was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. Gasps erupted from every corner of the square. Mia looked at her mother. Amina's face had turned pale. The witness lifted a final sealed document. This paper contains the name of the person who started everything. Immediately, voices broke out around the crowd. It must be one of the uncles. No, it was probably a greedy cousin. Maybe one of the business partners. The witness remained silent. Slowly, he handed the document to Zara. The entire family held its breath. Zara opened the paper carefully. Her confident expression suddenly disappeared. Shock filled her eyes. What is it? Mia whispered. Zara couldn't speak. She simply handed the document to her mother. Amina's hands shook as she accepted it. The crowd waited. Seconds felt like hours. Then Amina looked down at the signature. The name. The person behind the conspiracy. The person who had secretly helped strip away her inheritance. The person she had trusted more than anyone else. Tears instantly filled her eyes. The document slipped from her trembling fingers. A look of horror spread across her face. The crowd leaned forward desperately, trying to see. Then Amina stared at the name in horror and whispers, "It can't be, my own sister."